watching a very special session of Agenda AWANI recorded right here at the World Economic Forum ASEAN in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. And at the World Economic Forum, one of the best things for me as an editor, anchor and journalist is that I get to meet all groups of people in one place. And here, they don't wear one hat. For example, one astounding personality is Anar Brayasaikan from Mongolia. There's parallel initiative running with the World Economic Forum. One is the young leaders, the other is global shapers. And Anar is one of the global shapers, and World Economic Forum, they don't just select anyone to be a global shaper. Anar has shown that she has produced exemplary work and leadership, especially in the industry of education. Right now, she's, if I read her tag well, the Orkalan International School in Mongolia. But she has also researched on use of microbiotic food for children between 14 and 18. So between all that, your e-teacher scholarship program and everything else, tell us why is it that World Economic Forum was so interested in making you a global shaper? Because when I see you, I know for a fact that you're a role model to look at. But let us hear it from you.
Thank you. So first of all, it's my honor to be speaking with you. And I've been a global shaper for the past 2 years. And I'm very much thankful for my hub to have selected me as one of their family shaper. So I think the World Economic Forum focuses on shapers because they're young, they're well educated, and they are trying to give back to the community in their own sense. And global shapers are from different sectors with a different experience, and once they come back together, they can actually do something and in the community.
For Mongolia and for education, tell us your vision. How should it be? Because I've had many interviews at the World Economic Forum, and we keep going back to the basics of education. If communities, no matter where they are, have proper education, have access to education, they will have the tools to empower themselves to be whatever they want themselves to be.
I think Mongolian education system is progressing. We've just shifted to Russian Cyrillic since the 90s, and before that it was Mongolian script.
Okay.
So nowadays we're moving into more international education systems, which is providing more opportunities for younger people. And I think the Mongolian education system would change and become better. But my vision is we need to focus on our special educational needs, train our teachers to have more, to give more quality education.
What is the issue now? Since, you know, if we use the old 20th century westernized way of judging education, we'll be looking at the number of A's, the cumulative grade point average, CGPAs and stuff.
Yeah.
But the world has been led by many leaders out of Ivy League universities.
Right.
And there's many problems and issues. So what is it? Do we want high technology, you know, experts in mathematics and nanotechnology, but at the same time we want them to have the soul of Asia?
Right.
We know that we must not desecrate sacred grounds. And sacred ground is not just religious, it's that nice green field, that clear river water that we will forever want it to be so. But more and more that's being challenged by the so-called development.
Of course, technology is affecting a lot. Today's generation has much of technology in their everyday usage. It has its own goods and of course not the good ones, but technology in education is giving access to a lot of information. But I feel like students nowadays today should have more sense of volunteerism and thinking outside of the box and doing something differently. It's okay to have like good GPA or like being expert in mathematics, but you have to have whole personal development, which will affect once you go into university. You should be able to talk with different people. Once you go into a working sector, you should be able to work in teams. So secondary schools, education system should help students to think outside of the box.
How do you propose we do that when there's more and more pressure to qualify and go to great university? how do people look at the emotional quotient? And because you've thought to underprivileged children from, if I have my notes correctly, Africa, Vietnam, Hong Kong, even in Mongolia, not having access to the best of education doesn't mean that you cannot educate yourself to be successful in life.
I think any country's government should focus on training the teachers. If they can train the teachers well, they can access to thousands of children and make a change. Because it's difficult to, provide everything because governments can't fund everything.
Yep.
And each country should focus on funding the public schools as well and training the teachers.
The old gap of the 20th century seems to be following the new opportunities of the 21st. WEF focuses a lot on the fourth industrial revolution or Industry 4.0, and in ASEAN, not everywhere has Wi-Fi or access to broadband. So if that gap is still there, and now on top we have the disruption of the fourth industrial revolution, wouldn't gaps be bigger in our society?
Right. Socioeconomic gap is becoming more and more in every country, especially in ASEAN, especially in Mongolia. But if we can't change that socioeconomic gap through education, our next generation would suffer. So we should focus on, making less of a socioeconomic gap through providing quality education so that we can prepare our next generation.
And I have to go for the first break, but once we are back, there's a lot of great people here. I've met a Swiss who relocated to Asia, to Southeast Asia, and now the grandchildren are being born here. And he helped the worst of the worst, victims of abuse, of trafficking. So once we are back from the break, I want to see and seek your story or stories that you have come across when you deal with the young, with the underprivileged. In Asia, it's always the people's story that will be the greatest move for education and development. We'll talk about that after the short break. You are still watching a very special recorded session of Agenda AWANI. I'm still here with Anna Bayasaikan, a very impressive global shaper from Mongolia. And I want to share stories on this show, and I need your help. I need you to share maybe specific stories as you deal with the underprivileged, with their education, that move you, and hopefully it can move the audience to be inspired to do more.
The reason I've started working in the education sector and choosing education as my major was because I wanted to help children from different backgrounds. And I've met with children from Africa, Vietnam, Hong Kong, and Mongolia, but they all have one goal: to live a happy life. But sadly, there's children who don't have access to, what other children have in the Western countries or privileged schools. When I was teaching visually impaired students in Mongolia, they were 100% to 20% visually impaired, but they really wanted to learn English, and they wanted to take a TOEFL exam and go into Korean university, and they had a huge dream, but one barrier was their English. So we were teaching English to visually impaired students for 2 months with my students, and I think that was one of the best memories of my lifetime.
Sometimes we think that we can stand resolute and not be touched by the surroundings around us. And it's always to the contrary, that even for us journalists, when we go to, extreme zones like the war zone or something, the plight of humanity will always bring you to your knees. For you, was there a specific student that always remained in your memory and comes to you when you're lonely or looking at the nice sunset, and these images will always pop up? Because at the end of the day, this is about the emotional quotient and people-to-people relationship.
Right. I'm a very young person, and I just went into education sector like 2 years ago. And when I started working at a school, it was very difficult for me because all the teachers were very much like my parents' generation, and they wouldn't accept me that fast. And that time I was teaching English to grade 12 students, and they were my friends and my colleagues somehow. So students were my colleagues. And one student who was called Namonde, she was helping me through the whole year when I was just starting my career as a teacher. So whenever I see a problem, I think about her, and then everything becomes better.
Tell us more about Namonde.
Namonde. Yes.
Tell us more about her.
Now she studies at University College London, and she's one of the brightest young mind I've known. Until
when you first met her, how was she?
Actually, she remembers me because I went to the same school as her, and then she known me for a long time, but which I didn't. So she was very quiet, and but once I get to know her, she was very much energetic and positive.
You mentioned the generation of your parents and before. So it's easy at the World Economic Forum to just say that the young has potential and then we must empower them. There's even a session focusing on what if the youth of ASEAN runs ASEAN now. So I want to go back to that previous generation, the current generation. I'm half and half. I am half with the new generation. Half of my body is with the old. So how do you look at it through your own personal mobility? It's not like we're saying that the young will clean everything and start from a totally vacant platform, right? Heritage is important to us. Traditional, historical wisdom is also important to us. So how do you look at it from your own personal journey?
I think, as you say, the younger generation of today should know about our history and culture and heritage so that we can move forward. Without it, we cannot move forward. But I think if we can do what ASEAN is doing today, the younger generation can do a lot too.
Let me give an example. Was it easy for your parents to let you go and leave Mongolia, leave the family to go all the way to Hong Kong and just further your study, for example?
Of course, financially it was difficult.
Exactly.
But in their hearts, they wanted me to have a quality education so that I can change something in Mongolia. And my parents' generation is very much raised in Soviet Union time. And now, that time everybody was speaking Russian, but now the Mongolian new generation is learning English and Chinese. So how we see the world is pretty much different with technology.
All right, cool. And I have to go for the last break once we are back. You know, with global shapers, I wouldn't be doing them justice if I only asked about themselves and their world. Global shapers are supposed to look at the world. So I want to ask you later about the world in the sense of the eyes of a young person from Mongolia, because you were exposed to the Russian side of history. Now with English empowerment and your degree and what you're doing, you're looking at the rest of the world, especially English-speaking ones. You even have your student going all the way to London to study and all that. So more and more people are saying that with the rise of Trump and everything else, the world is getting more partisan. If it's politics, we're shifting more to the extreme right, the far right as they call it. In Europe, with Brexit, and with Trump in US. If it's religion, we're getting more segregated to our own kind. And that's the rise of extremism and terrorism that we've seen being used as an excuse for violence. So how do you, as a young leader and global shaper, because global shaper can network with other global shapers around the world, and you do meet from time to time, how do you look at this new, complex and challenging world from the eyes of a young global shaper right after this short break? You are still with me. I'm here at the World Economic Forum ASEAN in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. And last year it was in Malaysia. It was fun at the WEF ASEAN. AWANI had a live telecast and everything. This year, I want to continue the good things at World Economic Forum ASEAN. And it has enabled me to meet somebody like Anar Bayar Saikan from Mongolia, Global Shaper. We've covered the Mongolian side, we covered the education side. Now, I want to enhance the audience with your view, your fresh views of the world that we have now. With internet, with revolution called the fourth industrial revolution, no one place in the world can escape anymore.
Yeah.
If that place doesn't go to the world goes to that place, to Google Maps or whatever else. So how do you look at this rising consciousness, populist consciousness, that tend to gravitate more towards their own? People say that's why the referendum in UK goes for Brexit, because they look at people from the outside coming in and they feel challenged in their economic stability for their own self and family. For example, more foreigners are taking up education, health and jobs. We look at Trump, and Trump is now asking, what have you given to America? You know, trade deficit is way for you, not for me. And I want to relook this. And what he says about Asia and China, for example, is also very extreme to a lot of people. So when we look at religion, there's terrorism, people killing people violently in the name of God. And the world seems to be moving and gravitate to that also in response. So as a young global shaper, how do you have hope with such a complex and, in that sense, chaotic world?
The world is changing very fast, moving very fast. How we live, how we eat, how we move is changing. That's where the fourth industrial revolution is coming and affecting everything. But we, the younger people, wish and hope it can change for the better. And of course, we're not going to escape issues or problems in any country. But when the young people comes together, global shapers, and do something to make it better, we can make big changes from small steps. Small steps is what I want to take from. See, it's always interesting to speak with the young leaders or global shapers. You have a second degree in basketball. People will think that, you know, playing sport is not going to solve nuclear war threat. But sports has been proven to unite people regardless of race, religion or whatever. I support Liverpool Football Club. I have celebrated with an African before. So how do you look, and your second degree is in basketball, how do you look at these small things that seemingly look small but actually carries very big consequences? In Mongolia, in any country, a lot of people don't think that girls play basketball or rugby. Really? But which I chose to play basketball and rugby during my teenage years. And I think it was one of the best decisions because it taught me how to work in teams and, you know, have punctuality and have the power to do something and finish something. So if younger people learns to educate mentally, but at the time physically, it gives a lot of lessons too. Sometimes young people fall into the trap of the old perception and understanding. It's like only governments can do things. Only United Nations can help to mobilize effort at the global level. But with new technologies, even an individual can do so much. Right. And why let the extremist element like IS or Daesh has more than 6,000 properties digitally, from blogs to Telegram groups or whatever else. So why don't we use it for good? Why wait for the status quo to change? Isn't that the message also from the global shapers? Yeah, as a global shaper, I think we can use technology for the better. We can access to a lot of information and provide information at the same time to different people in different regions. You've seen that happening in Mongolia too, right? Yeah, in Mongolia we didn't have Wi-Fi until like 1950s, 95. 1995 only had Wi-Fi. Yes. But we were still on dial-up, right. No broadband yet at that time. So with that, the worry is negative messages are also abundant on the internet. As in the old days, we yearn for more connectivity. Now we know that it's not that simple. Once the young people have connectivity, how do you know what they're looking at, what they're reading, who they're talking to? For example, the dark net, which is said to be very powerful and used more
resources as compared to the Google that we have.
Right. Once connection becomes even more and more, younger people, a lot of them are facing bully or social bully or suicide. And lately I've seen a TV show called 13 Reasons Why, where young people bully each other through social media or just in the real lifetime. So if we can't provide the right education for the younger people on how to look for right information, how to have a good time of Facebook and then not log into it after that and do your homework. Because I have a brother who's 14 years old and he is constantly on his phone. And every time I tell him to stop it, he's like, I'm on Facebook, I need it for my homework. So we need to teach them how to use it correctly.
Okay. As the last point, to summarize, sometimes people see World Economic Forum as very elitist. Of course, in January, all eyes are on Davos. It's not cheap to be there, you know. It's costly, and you know the elites of the elites will be there, the economic elites, the political elites. But it's there also that global shapers like you, social enterprises are there. So how would you tell the young people watching this show what World Economic Forum can bring? It's not that I'm supporting World Economic Forum, but this is the platform that you do not need to wait for things to change. It's being discussed right here and right now.
I never thought I would be here, attending WEF events. And I had a privilege to become a global shaper and attend this event, and it's fully funded by the WEF. I think because they're supporting younger people to come here and be the voice of the youth, is they can go back to their community and do something and learn from here from people with different experiences and different cultures.
And it's an empowering ecosystem to be in.
Right.
Thank you so much, Anna Bayosaikan, for making time. Say hi to the young people of Mongolia for us, and hopefully you'll visit Kuala Lumpur soon and we can have this discussion live on air. Thank you so much. Thanks to you for watching. This has been a very specially recorded session of Agenda AWANI at the World Economic Forum ASEAN, right here in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. Good night and goodbye. Thank you so much.